Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene, where, empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world. My name is Jean DeVenny. My preferred pronouns are she, her. And with me today is our minister, Reverend Jen Youngsun, collaborative pianist, Suzanne Giordano, vocalists, Izzy Kreka and Bob Serentz, board president, Daniel Blades, and affiliated community minister, Reverend Dennis Reynolds. And working behind the scenes, our master of technical skills, communications coordinator, Kat Johnson. We gather in worship to find meaning and to live more deeply. Worship creates connections within, among, and beyond us, calling us to our better selves, calling us to live with wisdom and compassion. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your image of the holy, we're glad you're here. If you're visiting us today, we'd love to hear from you and invite you to fill out the visitor form as you feel called. The link is being dropped into chat now.
Good Sunday morning, everyone. My name is Jen Youngsun, and I serve this wonderful congregation as its settled minister, and I use the pronouns she and her. Today, we're doing something really special by welcoming my colleague, the Reverend Dennis Reynolds, into a more formal relationship with this church. And so the president of the board, Daniel Blades, will do the honors.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Daniel Blades. I am the president of your board of trustees, he, him. And it's my great honor today to welcome Dennis Reynolds. So Dennis has been a member of our congregation since 1993. After his retirement from a 30-year career in early childhood education at the University of Oregon, he had a late in life career as a UU minister and chaplain. Our church actually ordained him in 2012. Now, as a matter of good professional practice, and in recognition of his contributions to our church and to this city, it is appropriate and timely that we clarify and formalize this relationship. To that end, your board has approved a covenant of affiliation with Reverend Reynolds as UUCE's affiliated community minister. Let this covenant be a formal acknowledgement of the mutual affection and warm relationship which enriches us all. We recognize Dennis's continuing ministry of bringing UU principles and values to the larger community, especially through his work in anti-racism and environmental justice. Congratulations, Dennis.
Thank you. It's an honor to find new ways to serve this beloved congregation.
We light our chalice today with words from Jennifer Wellwood's poem, Unconditional. Willing to experience aloneness, I discover connection everywhere. Turning to face my fear, I meet the warrior who lives within. Opening to my loss, I gain the embrace of the universe. And surrendering into emptiness, I find fullness without end.
This month, we are nurturing our relationships. When the world feels like it's never been more separate and disconnected, we reach out to strengthen our bonds with one another, with all of creation, and with ourselves. Let us rest in the gentleness of this moment, letting the healing hands of self-understanding bring us to our own door, to our own mirror. Come, let us love again the stranger who was yourself. Come, let us worship together.
And at their ease. May they be joyous and live in safety. All beings, whether weak or strong, omitting none, in high, middle, or low realms of existence, small or great, visible or invisible, near or far away, or born or to be born. May all beings live in safety. These aspirational words are part of a regular meditation practice. It's a metta or kindness prayer, and Suzanne and I recite it many mornings as part of that practice. Now, contemplative practice, times to be quiet and still, are important parts of my life. These include those morning meditations and also walking in a soft rain with my dog in the meadow that's behind our home, or times spent watching the sunrise as I sip a cup of tea, or even a microbrew while I watch the colors of a sunset. They also include hiking in the woods, paddling on waterways, and digging in my garden. That practice, literally putting my hands in the dirt, is one of my most profound ways of finding grounding. These reflective times are times for me to listen, to hear the songs of the birds and even those distant songs of the traffic, and to hear the small voice inside that emerges from within my own being. I used to find times of being alone and in silence awkward and pretty darn uncomfortable, but that's changed over time. A significant shift in that began in the summer of 1992. It was a particularly difficult time in my life back then. My second marriage had just ended. My teen son was acting out. I was juggling schedules around shared custody, and I had a busy, demanding career. During the weeks the kids were with mom, I was spending more time alone than I had ever done. You see, I had left my parents' house to move into a college dormitory and then into shared housing and then into marriage. I had never previously lived alone. And I didn't like that alone time. It made me a wee bit anxious. Somewhere within those silent times, a notion emerged of how I might better find some community and fill some of that emptiness. I decided to go to church. And because I'd been introduced to Unitarian Universalism as a youth and had found deep, important connections in my liberal religious youth LRY group back in Salem, Oregon, I decided to check out the Eugene UU Church. So I showed up for a Sunday summer discussion service at the old church building up at 40th and Donald. I was a bit nervous as I entered the room because I didn't think I'd see anybody there I know. But then in the room, I saw Gladys Belden, and I knew I was at the right meeting. I had met Gladys, a longtime member of this congregation, through our shared work as local children advocacy groups. And no matter what meeting I would go to, you could count on Gladys would be there. She showed up. If I arrived late for a meeting, which I have to admit was all too common and sometimes still is, I could look around the room for familiar faces, and if Gladys was there, I knew I was in the right meaning. Well, the summer Sunday, the truth of that was deeper than I could have possibly known. At the end of that service, I was warmly welcomed by two different men, Peter Watton and Jim Holm, who invited me to the men's group. That evening, I showed up there. Jim and Peter were there, and I also met Neil and John and Charlie and Gil and Skip and Frank and Jack. As part of that meeting, I shared from the heart about what was going on in my life. That gathered circle, listening in compassionate silence. I wept. I was welcomed and I was heard. I had rediscovered the power of compassionate presence and deep listening, and I was hooked. Well, the rest, as they say, is history. At church back then on Sunday mornings with my children in tow and in that men's group and in other connections with this congregation, I began to sense an opening in a part of myself that had been too long ignored. That part of myself I call spirit began to shine. A couple of years later, at the end of a Sunday service in which I had shared a reflection, the interim minister, Betty Pingle, came to me and said, "Dennis, have you ever considered the ministry as a career? I think you should." Whoa, and wow, and yes. Yes, for I knew in the core of my being that her words were true. A quiet voice within had been talking to me about that audacious notion, and now she gave it voice. It made no sense. It was not logical or financially wise, and yet it became increasingly necessary to follow that path. It took a while, but I found myself in my mid-50s and a student at Meadville Lombard Theological School. There, my studies of humanisms and process and liberal theologies, UU history, pastoral care, world religions, and worship, lots of worship, opened my mind and my soul more fully to a kind of knowing that comes from deep within. And knowing that though enhanced by my studies and expanded when I explored the words of teachers from many traditions, I could hear best during times of silence and deep reflection. What I hear there and in those times is not logical or clear necessarily, but it's undeniably part of something awesome and awe-inspiring. I call that something mystery. Sometimes I call it God. When I listen deeply, I know that I am connected to all life and to a universal love. I know that I have a responsibility to do what I can to make the metta prayer I recite most mornings a bit more real in the world. These things I know. I invite you now to join us in singing in number 391, Voice Still and Small. We'll sing it together twice.
Winner of the 1992 Nobel Prize for Literature, Derek Walcott was a West Indian poet and playwright. Born to white parents in colonial St. Lucia, Walcott's grandparents were African and had been enslaved. From Love After Love by Derek Walcott. The time will come when, with elation, you greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back to your heart itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life.
Lao Tzu says that one who knows others is wise, but one who knows themselves is enlightened. Carl Jung would say it a little bit differently thousands of years later. He said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. Dreaming is essential for cultivating hope, but our highest aspirations as spiritual people is to wake up, or as our mission so plainly states, to transform ourselves so that we can serve the world. And that is going to require an intentional practice of looking inside and nurturing a relationship with the one who knows you by heart. Today, we have access to more knowledge and information than we could ever use in our lifetime. As a result, we end up knowing more about strangers than we do about ourselves. All day, all night, we can have the sound of someone else's life playing in our headphones. We read about other people's accomplishments, their dreams, their wisdom. We look at photos of their homes, their clothes, their lifestyles through filters that make them seem, oh, so perfect. Facebook and Instagram keep feeding us other people's opinions and thoughts. And I want you to remember that all of us are susceptible to misinformation, manipulation, and conspiracy theories. It's not just those other people. It seems that we modern beings have figured out how to design a life where we can totally avoid self-reflection. We can easily drown out any impulse to sit, eat, love ourselves. The problem with all of our devising is that the content has become so compelling. It takes a lot of energy to want to turn away from that activity of other humans and work on nurturing a relationship with myself. Come, sit, eat. All who seek, all who yearn, all who strive for a fuller, more wholehearted life, you who have been avoiding the love that's been right there all along, you belong here. You are seen here. And yet, being seen, being fully seen, it's kind of scary, isn't it? It's like those scanners at the airport. I don't know if I really want to be fully seen like that. But you know, if I'm not willing to be seen, then that means I'm hiding and I'm holding back. If I'm not willing to be seen, then I'm missing out on some awesome, wholehearted living. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know who Brené Brown is. She gave a TED Talk a number of years ago that's been viewed over 55 million times. And her message is worth repeating. So she starts by saying that connection is the force that brings people together in communities like this one and motivates us to make justice and create peace. Connection gives purpose and meaning to our lives. And it also has a neurobiological basis, which means that we are physiologically wired to want that connection. As Brown was doing her research in the field of qualitative social work, she found that whenever she asked people about love, they would tell her about heartbreak. When she asked them about belonging, they told her the most excruciating stories of being left out. And when she asked people about connection, they told her stories about disconnection. And she asked herself, okay, if we are biologically hardwired to desire connection, then what seems to be getting in the way? Why are there so many stories of disconnection? And her answer turned out to be shame. Brown understands shame as the fear of disconnection, the fear that if people really knew us, really saw us clearly, they would judge us as being unworthy and we would lose all of those wonderful connections. I mean, what if my children discovered that, what if my parents ever found out about, what if my spouse knew? What would happen if my best friend found out? Or I would hate for anyone to see this part of me. Sometimes that fear is so intense, the shame so deep that we want to keep a pretty good distance from other people. And from this hiding place, it's easy to feel like we're the only one who struggles with shame, but trust me, we all feel it. I have felt it all throughout my life. And even though that shame no longer drives the bus, it's still back there in one of those seats. Every once in a while, it pokes at me. You know, the next time we are all gathered in this sanctuary, all in one place, I would really like to ask you all to turn to a neighbor, a stranger, someone you don't know very well, and reveal 3 things to them. 1 thing that you regret, 1 thing you feel sad about, and 1 thing you feel shame about. What do you think? How do you think that would go? The writer Annie Lamott once said, "Here is the thing I wish someone had told me when I was young. Everybody thinks bad thoughts. Everyone, even the most seemingly balanced, serene, loveliest people sometimes have really icky thoughts. To me," she continues, "this is excellent news. And this means that we're all in the same boat. Mostly loving, mostly helpful and creative, but every so often, not so much. This does not mean you're not okay. To the contrary, it means that you are real and deeply human, which is who we were born to be." Have you ever worried that people will pull away if they knew the truth about you? I have. When I was little, I worried my family would reject me because I was weird and moody and I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. Have you ever felt like you're not blank enough? You fill in the blank. I remember feeling not white enough. I remember feeling not American enough, not thin enough, not smart enough. Do you ever have the fear of being seen or exposed as a fraud? So I haven't felt this in a long time, not since becoming a minister, but in my first career, when I was first climbing that corporate ladder, I didn't feel like I deserved any of my promotions, and I felt like an imposter. We all want meaningful, authentic connection. But in order for that to happen, we're gonna have to be willing to allow ourselves to be seen. I mean, really seen. I want to make a little side note here about guilt, which is not the same thing as shame, right? Guilt has to do with doing. Shame is about our very being. I mean, we make mistakes all the time, right? We do things and we say things that hurt other people. We press the send button a little too fast on the email when we could have waited a few hours to cool off. In that case, we may feel guilty. We may not have performed to the best of our ability, but those missteps and blunders don't have to seep into our very being. When we miss the mark and fall short, it doesn't mean that we're unworthy. We just say, I'm sorry. We ask for forgiveness. We get up and we try again, vowing to do better next time. But sometimes, and for some people, those mistakes do find passage into our very being and warps the sense of who we are. I think parents especially are really hard on themselves, and it got way worse during this pandemic. Mothers and those who are primary caregivers trying to make decisions based on contradictory information, all the while a subtle message seeps in that they have to get this right, that they're supposed to be perfectly patient and perfectly wonderful through all of this. And what makes it all worse is secrecy, silence, and judgment. Shame thrives in that environment, and it leads to a small and sheltered life. Empathy, then, is the antidote to shame. Empathy shines a light, exposing secrets, giving voice to pain, and pushes judgment out of the driver's seat. And while it may seem like a very personal issue, shame affects the whole human family. Because if we are not able to be kind and loving to ourselves, then we cannot be kind and loving to others. Many wise people through the ages have claimed, if you truly loved yourself, you would never harm another person. Given how much harm we seem to be doing to one another, it seems like we have a long way to go in our loving ourselves. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. I read an article written by a young man who totally rejects this commandment, saying, if I loved my neighbors the same way that I love myself, I would look for their dishonesty. I would look for their laziness. I would assume that my friends were only friends when it was convenient to them or when they needed help with something. If I loved others the way I love myself, I would assume that everyone gossiped or talked about me just the same as I was doing to them. Love my neighbor as myself? No thanks, he says. As a scientist, Dr. Brown wondered what could account for the differences between those who are able to love themselves and those who find it almost unbearable. After studying these two groups, she said, there's only one variable that made a difference. People who have a strong sense of love and belonging believe. They believe they are worthy of love and belonging. That's it. They believe they are worthy. Now she's getting into my territory. Belief, faith in something that we can't touch, we can't see, we can't measure, but we believe. We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all beings, even little old me. With sustained spiritual practice, we can grow our sense of worthiness and we can strengthen our skills of self-compassion. And one of the ways we can do that is to watch what we consume. I don't mean what we eat, but I'm talking about the content we absorb through our ears, through our eyes. What are the external messages that we allow into our mind, from social media to podcasts to entertainment pretending to be news? What are the internal voices saying? What are they telling you? Do they tell you that you need to be better, that you're not good enough, you're not working hard enough? What are the words that quietly chatter in the background of your days? And so here's spiritual practice number 1. Listen to that chatter. Pay close attention to its voice. I went to a retreat once where they asked us to keep a journal of every single thought that we became aware of. After filling page after page, I looked through the sentences. Wow, not nice, not gentle, not loving. Tara Brach, the Buddhist teacher, says that sometimes the easiest way to appreciate ourselves is by looking through the eyes of someone who loves us. So here is your second intentional spiritual practice. Bring to mind someone who loves you. Maybe it was someone from long ago. If you're not able to picture a person, then maybe the someone who loves you is a beloved animal. There's a great bumper sticker that says, "Lord, help me to see myself the way my dog sees me." Now, if you want extra credit for this spiritual practice, do it in front of a mirror. Practice seeing yourself through the eyes of someone who loves you. Practice seeing your beauty, your goodness, and then say out loud, "May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. And may you live with ease." You deserve loving kindness, not because of anything you've done or not done, but simply because you are. You are worthy because you are a member of the cosmic family of beings and things. You are worthy because you came from stardust and you will return to the stars one day. May you find your way back to yourself by reading your own life, by listening to your own songs, by offering empathy to the most vulnerable parts of yourself. May it be so. Amen.
We need each other when we mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid. And we need one another in the hour of success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs. All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us. We invite you now to share the joys and sorrows that are in your hearts today. The chat feature is now open.
I'd like to share a prayer from my colleague Barbara Cheatham with you. She was one of the first ministers that ever mentored me. Let us be gentle with ourselves just now. For a few minutes, let us release ourselves from a world that is too much with us, too noisy, too frantic, too demanding, too judging. Let us be gentle with ourselves just now. For a few moments, let us release ourselves into the calm, still world that waits to receive us, where the quiet is broken only by sounds of our own making, by those of our children near at hand, by passersby in the street outside, by a bird, by an airplane high overhead. Within this welcoming quiet, let us befriend ourselves. Where we would unfairly and endlessly berate ourselves for our imperfections, let the tongue of harsh judgment be silenced. We will do better tomorrow. We will rise to the occasion. We will surprise the world. For now, let us simply rest in the gentleness of this moment.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Starting tomorrow, we enter into a week of remembrance with community rituals adapted so that everyone can participate. You can find the details in your weekly connections. Each of us feels the loss of someone or something from this past year. It is right and good that we acknowledge those losses together. May you feel these words of blessing upon your grieving heart, granting you all that you need in this moment and in the days ahead. Go in peace, everyone.